Hi guys, welcome to Second Perspective. My name is Paul Weston. Over there
It's
is
Mitchell Allen. I'm
hey.
here.
Yeah,
Hey.
so we're going to be doing a QQ discussion on Quantum of Solace. That basically means we're going to be speaking freely. That means spoilers. As another thing, because we're doing sort of a lead up to Expector, we are going to be spoiling Casino Royale as well, which I hope you saw Casino Royale
But
and
but
then
can
this
but can
film.
I be honest? Like,
Yeah.
if you haven't seen Casino Royale
Hmm.
and you see this movie,
Hmm.
it's gonna be more incomprehensible to you
Yeah,
than
exactly.
that.
Right? Like,
Like, it's
I'm not.
already confusing to
Yeah.
me. But if you
Hmm.
haven't seen it, is
It's
movie's
going
gonna
to
be
be
a
very
mess.
bizarre. So
Yeah.
we're going to make the assumption that you have seen Casino Royale,
Yes.
which will allow sort of our discussion. And like our main focal point is going to be like, how did Casino Royale work, and why did
Mhm.
Quantum of Solace not, right? And what because I feel like it could be broken down fairly simply of like Casino Royale did this and Quantum of Solace did that, right? Or like it did not do this, right? So
Yeah, like in a way, for sure.
yeah, so I'm just gonna get right into it. One of the first things that it absolutely sucks balls on. That's a little strong, but that it doesn't. That it
Is
was
it strong?
so. Well, the thing that I really appreciated about Casino Royale is that some think, oh yeah, the first act is a little bit slow, whatever. But I thought it was very ingenious and um, very realistic in like how Bond finds this information. Like he has to go to this golf club, and he creates his own diversion by smacking the guy's car into a bar to get
Right.
all the security guards out, and he does this, and like he's always being proactive in pushing the story forward, right?
Hmm.
And like one of the very first things that happens in Quantum of Solace is like they bring in Mr. White, he gets away or whatever,
Hmm.
and then he comes back and they're like, "Oh, don't worry, we have marked money in their like their luggage." I'm like, "All right, I
Yeah.
guess,"
Yeah.
but
Like,
that's
there's
just a
always
sign of all the
You
shit
know
that
what it is? There's
happens.
always solutions in this movie,
Mm,
but you don't know where they've come from.
mm,
Like, it's true. Like that. I mean, that scene. I really love that scene that sequence in the first in Casino Royale where he's
mm,
just traveling around, like, hidden cars and like getting people to like move to one room and then to the other, because it shows that even if he's improvising, like, there's some strategy that he has. And
mm,
in this movie, there's just stuff that seems to be happening to let them win,
mm,
which I find, it's like that Deus Ex Machina stuff
mm,
where it's just all everything's set up for him to succeed,
mm.
and then you're not, it doesn't help you get invested in the whole thing. It sucks.
Well, like, and the big thing for me is like to sort of build on that point is like with the action sequences, like in Casino Royale, they all are furthering the plot. Like the reason why
Hmm.
Daniel
Yes.
Craig has to like hang upside down from a car when it's in the airport is because he has to stop the bombing, and the reason he stops the bombing is because the chief is gonna like try and short the stocks, and like it's all okay, it's all related. But in like Quantum of Solace, first of all, the car sequence, I'm like I don't even know what's going on, but
It
whatever.
is the one
But
of the messiest
mm,
scenes ever. It's
which
ridiculous.
I know that you want to talk about, so I'll let you
Yeah,
get
sorry,
to it in
sorry.
a
Just
minute.
we'll get back to that.
But there's a particular scene where Daniel Craig is watching Camille through the Bond girl Camille through a chain link fence, and I don't know. He's like watching her. She just tried to kill him, or they push him out of the car, or whatever. And then
Right.
she gets on this boat, and then for whatever reason, even though Bond has gotten the information that he needs, which is a GPS connection on somebody's cell phone so he can track them, he suddenly does this like weird, like almost like Mission Impossible esque like a motorcycle ride onto
Yeah,
these
yeah.
boats, and then he risks his life and does a really sort of haphazard, risky rescue mission of this girl, and he finally barely gets out. And then he gets out, he goes and drops off the girl to some random character,
Yeah.
and then he walks away. And then the last shot we see of that scene is him looking at the cell phone with the information that already fucking has. So
Right.
like
Right.
literally, there's I don't understand that because I'm gonna go on for a few seconds here. So
Yeah.
let me kind of
I
unbox it.
Go for it.
It's at first I was like, that's strange. They're showing him that he's like, he says like the bitch is dead at the end of Casino Royale, and like he's being more misogynistic than he is as usual, and he's just sort of like cold and heartless to most people. he goes tries to save this girl who just tried to kill him, right? And then later on, he goes and he does something, and I totally forget. Like at the very end of the film, like he, goddamn,
Are you talking about?
Well,
like,
he does something where it's like he he pushes the guard off the roof, right?
Oh yes, yes, of course.
Okay, he kills somebody who won't give him information.
Yes.
So that just sort of even magnifies the whole confusion. Like, why the hell would he save this random girl, other than the fact that she's the Bond girl, and we kind of know that just through story structure. Like, that is just the hugest problem for me, because there was no need for the scene, and then it just confuses us further about how ruthless Bond is, right? Because, like, he doesn't even fall in love or, like, whatever with this girl. He ends up sleeping with a different girl who also dies, and it's just sort of like, I don't know. I think that encompasses, for me, the most of the story clarity issues and sort of my frustrations with this film. Right?
Yeah,
like, am I crazy?
No, that's a great call, because and the worst part is, of all of the action sequences in that movie, that one's like the most. It's the one I'm kind of the most okay with in a way. Like it's the one where I'm like, you know what, fine, I'll go with this. But you actually, it's not only that, but the way you brought this up, I think made sense. It's not only that the action sequences in Casino Royale further the plot, because they do. They do that really well. But within each of those sequences is a story. It is a completely, like, it's not just, car runs this way, car runs that way, boat goes up, boat goes down. There's a great scene in Casino Royale where he's trying to stop a guy from crashing a truck into a plane. And there's an internal logic in that scene as to, how he'll grab onto the truck so he can get inside of the truck. And that once he's inside of the truck, he still has to push the guy out to make sure that he, doesn't, like, run the truck into something dangerous. And then he still has to stop the truck. And there's always something within that has its own internal plot logic. And in this, it's just action because we have a lot of money, we have a lot of cameras.
You should have spent some time on... Yeah. Actually, one thing I should bring up, because you might not know it, but apparently the first draft for this film was brought up, given to the necessary people 20 minutes before the writer's strike.
Yes, I read this. That's true. That's
right. And, there are apparently some of the scenes they were, improvising... and I think that really shows. The writing is way more suspect in this film, and if it had the same kind of writing love, because I can see this if this was a first draft someone gave me, I'd be like, it's for a first draft, it's not bad. There's some strong ideas you can work on, and a lot of fixing we need to do. But okay, cool. But this is not supposed to be. This is not something you're supposed to publish, right? Yeah. This is the thing where you find out. Oh, shit. Okay, the whole thing I was actually writing about was how Bond is not a heartless person. He's actually quite an emotional, sensitive person. And he instead fuels that and turns it into inner rage. Because if he was heartless, he would have a face where it's just he doesn't care. Right?
He would just have another cool mystery.
But instead, he smiles when people die. He punishes people. He's a very emotional person, which is really cool. Okay, then you realize as a writer, okay, this is what I'm writing about, and then you spend another 6 months rewriting everything because you found what you've written. You strip everything. You realize your film is shit, which we could talk about next, and then you kind of redo it, right? And maybe that's what I think. This is a strong first draft. This is a terrible finished draft, right?
Yeah, and I guess we were talking about this, but it is true that having Bond go through these trials when usually Bond is just cool, collected, and almost like an archetype that just has to get the job done. To have him invested with some human quality is not only interesting but terrific idea. But when you were talking about how he releases his inner rage and he's not heartless, but that's how he does it. Well, it's not like we don't see that in Casino Royale. He really does seem to relish the kills in those movies too. In that movie too. So it's not like we're seeing a side of Bond that we haven't seen yet. In fact, we just we just don't address it as much in the movie before, but it's there the whole time. I mean, he is
Well-
playing a continuation of that character. So the performance
Hmm.
sticks through really nicely, but there's just no need for an hour and 47 of, just this.
Well, I guess with this one, I wish that could have manifested itself into being the key point, right? Because Eva Green's character dies, and like that really spurs him into who he is, right? And because they do a really good job of putting seeds of that sort of nature, and then like having this sort of nature grow and manifest as something very damaging, and like actually screw up missions. That's cool. That's great. That's interesting, right? And they make jokes about trying not to kill everybody, but it's like as flippantly as Judi Dench's character says that stuff, I feel that's how they deal with the theme, right?
Yeah, having said that, one of the things I was thinking about is one of the few things that I all throughout the 3 or 4 Daniel Craig films that I love is the relationship between M and Bond. That I won't say anything more about what happens in Skyfall, but it's done. It's dealt with really beautifully in the next film. But somehow in this one, even though some of the dialogue is like real cheesy and some of the writing in terms of the way that they sort of dance around each other is lazy, there's still something really compelling about the idea that she's constantly protecting someone she doesn't need to fully protect. And I think that through line is still interesting enough to carry those two characters through and have it be justified. And so from that point of view, I guess the film's a little more successful. But it's just such a short no. And the other female character in this film is the direct opposite in terms of complexity of relationship. And it's a huge opportunity, right? We're talking about losing Vesper Lind, and now finally this new woman comes into his life. I'm glad that they didn't make it a romantic connection. That's an interesting choice. But don't make it a no connection or no chemistry, because then there's no reason to watch it.
Well, like, and the
she's
thing
very
too
disappointing.
My issue with that particular part is that when they get stuck in the cave after they do the whole plane thing, is that they literally just explain how she feels or what happened.
It's true.
And it's just like, I'm like this because this person killed my father and I want to kill him because he killed my father. And it's just sort of like, okay. Like that's compelling on some level. Yeah, valid is a much better word.
It's valid that we should care, but we don't.
Yeah, and why don't you think we care?
Why I think we don't care. A lot of what drives like watching great action movies in general, but also Bond movies, is that even if the characters aren't deep, they're interesting to watch, and the performances are like engaging to watch. And I find the casting of this one is just total misfire. Like I don't find her very charismatic. I don't find she has a lot of subtext going on in her performance, and it's mostly just she's sort of comfortable being there. Like I even found there were a couple of scenes where you almost feel her struggling with the position of being the Bond girl. Like I don't know whether she's trying to play vulnerable or strong at any one moment, or if it's a mixture of both, or it's hard to know exactly how she's approaching it, and the performance really suffers. It's confusing to watch in some ways.
I thought you nailed it on the head there for me, anyways. Where it's just everything felt very on the surface. There was no sort of complexity or subtlety or subtext to it all. It's just like how she feels or what she sees is what she is, right? And part of the reason why Vesper is so interesting is that like there's like she's an onion. There are many layers, right? And so with this person, it's like literally nothing. If she's angry, she's angry. If she's trying to seduce someone, she's trying to seduce. It's just like, right? And it's just
she does what, though I think it's the worst tendencies of Bond films in general is when the entire film has to service Bond as a character and nothing else. There is no individual sense of like her as a character or the story as having any like individual like viewpoint, but it's just Bond has to do something. Let's throw a bunch of stuff at him so he can be his cool self or whatever it is. And she feels like a device rather than someone who's a fully fleshed, which they really made great strides with in Casino Royale. And
like, let's be real, like they do, probably because they have in large part they have Sam Mendes in the third. Yeah. Right, and I think actually, you know what? Really, this is probably a good sign of like you and I were talking about directors before. Like, I feel like, oh god, I think it was someone like Scorsese or something that said like the director is. Somebody says like, well, I'm just a director. I'm not responsible for the script, and like, someone like Scorsese is like, no, your main responsibility is the script.
Yeah,
and like. You are responsible. If you are, even if you're not the writer, you have to talk to the writer to figure it out, to fix these issues. If you think this particular part is confusing or won't work for the audience, it doesn't mean you write it for the writer.
But it's also not like, if you read a little bit more about this film, like on Wikipedia or other interviews with the director, it's not like the director just has taken a back seat or anything. You can see that he actually seems to be working pretty hard on bringing this to life. So, I mean, Mark Forster has done Stranger Than Fiction and Finding Neverland, which films I actually really admire. They're good, kind of gentle, like somewhat cerebral movies, specifically Stranger Than Fiction. But the material that he approaches there is so radically different from this. And the problem with this is that he takes a script that really isn't very strong, but has, like we said, thematic potential, and he just squanders it with like really super, super fast pacing and very little focus, which I think is a huge issue. So I don't know if it's necessarily that he isn't working to get it done, but he's working in a way that's counterintuitive to how, the film should really play.
Well, why don't we just sort of briefly go talk on the villain? Because like, I'd like to, before we sort of wrap this up, I would like to talk about sort of my confusion on where they want to leave Bond in a sort of eternal state, but I don't want to leave the villain behind. So why don't you give your quick thoughts on the villain, and I'll sort of wrap it up with a question on Bond's inner thoughts.
I mean, simply put, the villain is confusing. And it's not only like the main villain himself, Matthew Almoric, who also brilliant performer in Diving Bell and the Butterfly, and he's been a character actor in like Grand Budapest and like a few other foreign films, and he's just a very strong performer, but he plays so cartoonish in this, and he's either like weirdly too quiet or too laid back in a way that's like dull and not like cool, it's just dull. Or he's yelling and he's like bug-eyed and he's upset about everything. It's just he's playing to like the weirdest extremes of that Bond villain.
Well, you're like the scene that proves your point is the very first one you meet him. It's like Camille comes in and he goes like, "Oh, Camille," and he goes, didn't expect me to still be alive. And he's like, "Oh, hey, look at this," and then she smacks out of his hand. And then all of a sudden, he's like, "Don't talk to me like that."
Exactly. Do you know what it is? It's like he's doing, and it's the thing about soap operas that I hate when they do this, and it's always this, I love you, I don't love you, I love you, I don't love you, where the emotions switch on a dime, and he's just playing that so unconvincingly through the whole scene, where it's just like, I'm playing with you. No, I actually care about you, but I'm playing with you. And it's just, it's irritating in a way to watch him just go over archetype on archetype and not bring anything interesting out of the dialogue.
I have a question for you. Like, okay, so performance aside, that's confusing.
Yeah. So you're talking about like the machinations of the villain itself, the character.
Yeah. So like, more like, what's confusing for you in terms of like the story structure
What's confusing is that like the stakes of this character are relatively low. Like, it's mixed with a weird political commentary on like the water shortage and the sort of political uprising of like the wealthy in Bolivia. And then it seems like this villain is sort of like taking advantage of that and is like climbing his way through the social ranks of that country. We have no idea though why it's Bolivia he's in. Like, he's clearly, I believe the character is French.
Mm.
I'm not sure, but just based on the fact that Mathieu Almoric is French and there's no reason to suggest otherwise, it seems like he's not from Bolivia. So
Mm.
why is he targeting A, that spot? Is it just because it's a vulnerable spot?
Mm.
And B, why does it matter to the rest of the world, which is I think a cornerstone of why Bond movies are so interesting to watch, is they usually affect a massive scale. There's a
Well,
massive scale,
I'm
and this is
gonna
just so tiny comparatively.
I'm gonna not argue, but sort of give I
Okay.
think context to one of the things. Is like
Yeah.
part of the reason why he's in Bolivia is
Yes.
that his geologist found that water reserve right underneath the ground, and I
I.
mean right, and like maybe that's the only spot that he can actually
That's
build
the
that dam,
only
right?
one. Okay.
That for me is not a problem, right? Because like, and that's a very sort of like a one-off kind of thing, like, oh, it just happens to have a lot of oil here or whatever, right? And it just happens that nobody wants this land anyways because there's no oil. And it goes, well,
That's
sucks
fine.
for you guys, right? Okay,
But
that's
then,
fair.
what is his relationship to Quantum? Is Quantum driving this
He's
acquisition of this water reserve? Is that the idea?
yeah, like he's in
Yeah.
charge of basically getting it so that they can control all the water in there, building all the dams, putting all the pipe. So like he's like the world's most evil businessman, and like he's trying to basically, holy crap, what's the word for when you don't drink enough water?
He's trying to create a drought. Is that
Well,
what you're saying?
yeah, it's not starve, but anyways, I feel like an idiot right now. But
Wow,
like,
what's happening? You're trying to dehydrate people?
there you go. Like he's basically
Yeah.
trying to dehydrate people to death, or
Sure.
pay like literally just a crap ton of money. But my biggest issue with the Bond villain is that I just don't. I'm not that afraid of him. Right?
Well, no, but that's what I mean. It's because what he's doing is sinister in a way, but it's almost like it's too real world sinister, is what it is. And it's this kind of weird mix in this movie that is like odd amount of realism mixed with just like this can't possibly be happening. Like it's so out of control.
But not
so
even that. But like Le Chiffre was scary, even when he was just.
But he's scary because he's almost like ghostly. Like he's like a.
Oh, but that's like you're saying that's what I'm saying,
he's a
right?
supernatural being, and there's something so not real, but like more grounded about this villain, where you're like he's just one of 6 billion people, whereas like Shiva feels like a force, a force of nature.
The thing too is just like that's. I like you're arguing with me as if I'm not saying that, but like
I'm saying the same thing.
But
it's true.
What like with the sheep is that what I'm saying is that I am afraid of him, even not just from like the fact that like eventually holds a whip or like a rope with a ball at the end kind of thing, or 3 balls in some cases. But
that's right.
The
Shing, that's right.
Sorry, you were freezing there for a moment. But like also with Le Chiffre is that like I fear what could happen in the dark, right? Like he could kill my family or something, right? And like I understand with Le Chiffre, people are still after him, but he's still also very scary in his own right. Whereas with Dominic Green, he makes sort of a threat like that to the latest guy that he basically puts into power in Bolivia. But by then, I'm not that afraid of him, right? So he's like, I could have your balls in your mouth.
Right. Yeah.
That just starts something, but by then it's too late. Like
no, it's way too late. Isn't that like the last scene in the hotel?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
So by then, we just know that it's all gonna wrap up and be Bond wins the day. So at that point, it's like you're right. It doesn't feel threatening early enough. So maybe that's the issue.
Maybe, but all right. Let's not like linger too long on this thought, but it was just something that really kind of bothered me quite a bit. And I think it's important, sort of leading up into Skyfall, is that with this film. With the theme of like Bond being ruthless, will he ever find love in his heart? Will he become compassionate in some capacity as much as a assassin can? There's a part where he's got Dominic Green by the hair, in the burning building, right?
Oh, right. And then he
And
hears
the gunshot
like
and all that stuff.
Camille
Right?
sort of like a gunshot, and then
Right.
like Camille's in the other room. Right?
So he hears that, and for a moment you're like, he's killed literally everybody he's touched in this game, in this film, and then you go, well, is this the part where he actually shows, compassion, being like, wait, maybe I don't need to kill everyone? He pulls him back up, lets him live, goes and actually focuses less on killing someone and more about saving someone. So like, okay, sorta started building a theme, but then he gets gets the Bond girl, and then they make it seem like they're trapped, they may not get out, and that he might actually kill someone out of like sympathy. It's almost like euthanasia.
Yes.
Where, like,
but that scene is so fascinating to me because it is the one moment that for me sells why this movie could be great.
And like, I think that could have been a really interesting moment, but I mean, I think it would need to be completely reconstructed in a different way, because like they would both need to die, so it would be either like die together or something. But it's like, she's dying, she's in pain, she hates burning, whatever, like something like that. And just a side note, I hate the fact that once she kills somebody, she can't save herself. That's such a Bond thing where it's just anyways,
when she's battling the guy that like is trying to do things with her or whatever. Yeah, we'll just say it. The guy who's trying to rape her. Like even when she's like battling with him, you can tell that she's going to lose that battle. Like there's no sense with Ava Green where you felt like she was in control of the situation. You always knew that she was a subordinate, which is just so sad. It's like a backstep.
I won't linger on too much of that because we've kind of built into that.
I just want to say my piece about that part. But
yeah. But they continue with sort of this theme build up. Is like, okay, Bond gets them out alive. First I was thought that's just a strange thing to bring up. If you know that Bond is like, okay, I can get us out, right? There's not even like shots that show like, oh, Bond suddenly sees something that can get them out. Right. So that's just poor construction or story clarity. So it makes that whole thing
off the wall.
I have no idea.
Something like falls off the wall, and he grabs it, and then it's like, oh, we're out.
No, it's just like they play this music. They really amp up this whole thing about like close your eyes. She's like, make the shot count, which is just stupid writing because she's all like hysterical yet using lines that he said when anyway. So it's just poorly constructed. They bring up an idea that he might actually have to kill someone out of compassion, but then just shoots the wall anyway. So it's just that sort of stupid thing. Like, okay, fine, you sort of bring up that idea, whatever, but then they escape the fire, and he sees Dominic Green walking in the desert, right? So let me kind of build this for you. He goes to the desert with Dominic Green.
Yes.
He lets him out. He's like, but you said you would like let me live. And he goes, well, I'm letting you live, right? I said, I've already told you everything I know. And James Bond's like, yeah. He goes, well, people are going to try and find you, but good thing you're in the middle of a desert. And then he hands him a can of fucking motor oil. Right? So, right there, you've built two very contradicting points. Right?
You're right. You haven't even built. Yeah.
You haven't even gotten into you haven't committed to one where it's like James Bond thought about being compassionate but couldn't, right? Or anything like that. You started an idea, but to even like get a finale with it, and then you get Bond to become this ruthless killer again, where he doesn't have to be, which is fine, but like build the fucking thematic point.
Yeah, it has to follow through. You're right.
And then he goes and tries to find Vesper's old boyfriend, right? Where, God knows wherever, he's with the Canadian girl, which I found hilarious. They made a few Canadian jokes about being like, we should focus the Canadians.
It's kind of weird, actually.
But anyways, but then he goes and he ultimately hints at that he's going to kill him, but then lets him live. Which, by the way, they used a crossfade, not on whether like he's going to whether James Bond's going to shoot him or not.
Yeah.
Which was why would you use such a crossfade?
It was such a cop out to that sequence.
Even if you're going to pretend or like hold in suspension of whether he shoots him or not, you use a cut, right?
Or something,
right? But not a crossfade, because instantly you deflate the entire scene, and you know he doesn't kill him, right? Or that's the stupidest way to do it. And then all of a sudden, you have James Bond letting someone live.
Right.
when like a minute ago he just
No,
killed
you're
someone.
right. It's
So
just a
what the
series of
fuck?
contradictions. So it's a series of contradictions. You
Like literally,
absolutely nailed that.
it's literally
I,
three
I,
contradictions.
yeah.
I don't
Didn't
understand.
even think about it because I forgot. Until this moment, I like had it in my notes, but I forgot to look at it. I completely forgot that scene with a Canadian ever happened because it just flew back in my mind. But now that you mentioned it, it is the most stacked. It's the reason why this movie fails is it tries to do like 8 things at once, and specifically those 2 things. But then it doesn't. It tries to resolve both, and then it doesn't do that. So then where does the character end up? Is he a mass murderer who with no empathy, or does he gain empathy by the end of the film?
But even then, it's like, sorry, but like,
Should he get? What do you think? Should he gain empathy by
I
the end of
think
this
it would
film?
be interesting to
Would that be better?
I think it would be interesting that he's left, having to deal with that thought and like leading into Skyfall with that sort of thing. But like, it's ultimately they suggest that he's found some sense of empathy. But the scene before you show that, like literally,
it's him handing him a death sentence,
right? So it's sort of like
flammable death sentence.
Where does Bond find this place for empathy? You don't show it on screen, which would be absolutely horrible to do because that's what you've theoretically built your entire film on. It's like the moment of revelation. You don't show it on screen. Like, what the hell is that? That's just like that's totally bizarre, right?
What it is just it's a cop out. It's trying to lead your story somewhere and then discovering that it doesn't work and then just backing up. Like I almost feel like the movie ends perfectly in a way because it nullifies exactly what happened before it, which means none of what you saw before it matters and you can skip it. So on that level, it sort of is great because if we had to have a lead-in from Quantum of Solace into Skyfall where it had to follow through that way, it would have made Skyfall so much weaker. But the fact that it backs up, there's an opportunity for the next movie to just go, oh, what just happened? I didn't see anything.
It's unfortunate that the strongest point of your ending is that you have erased your own sins is pretty bad.
Yes, it's pretty bad.
I do think like it could have been a very interesting idea of like Bond having to kill that girl in sort of like that, like
I see that
in compassion, whatever. That could be interesting because like first he sees Vesper drowning herself for whatever reason, right? We can talk about it at some other point, but that's really interesting. He sees someone that he cares about deeply get killed or die on purpose, and then in this one he actually has to do it and it's the right thing. That could have been a very interesting contrast between 2 endings, but instead it just shits the bed. So again, I do really think this film has some really strong thematic points, and I will pertain to that, and I hope I think it's too late with Daniel Craig, who can't go back on that theme, but I have hopes sometime in the next 50 years that I'm alive, fingers crossed, that they will do this theme, because for whatever reason I resonate deeply with it. Not that I'm some ruthless killer, but dun 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 dun. Other than that, I think we should just end this discussion because it's gone on far too long for a film that doesn't deserve it. But do you have any parting thoughts before we put this puppy to bed?
I could talk about and probably better than I didn't, but I could talk about the way this movie is cut forever. It is I'm gonna look up who cut this afterwards and just wonder why they hired this person because it is so frantically. It's like when you're editing a film, usually you get a bunch of footage, and the idea is to make choices and to throw it in a way that's cohesive and tells something akin to a story. That's what happens in narrative fiction filmmaking, and it's sort of like he got 14 cameras. And he got all of these shots, and he's like, I can find a way to use all of these in 30 seconds. And the whole movie is just plastered with coverage. Even dialogue scenes are then it's M. Then in the middle of M's sentence is James Bond. In the middle of James Bond's sentence is another character. And it's just going back and forth. And it's just so confusing the entire way that is actually one of the main reasons why, the villain thing, I completely glossed over. He couldn't focus. There's no focus in the editing, and it's a huge issue. I think part of the reasons why it just really goes off the rails for me.
Well, Unlike Quantum of Solace, we'll know when to cut, which is now. So, again, I'm Paul Weston over there.
Mitchell Allen.
And again, we're Second Perspective. Come see our review for Skyfall and our discussion. And then shortly after that, Spectre, which I'm really hoping is going to be a lot more like...
Crossed.
I hope it's going to be more like Skyfall and Casino Royale than this one. Anyways, guys, take care.
See you guys.